Hi, my name's Guy Bartmus. I'm the brewmaster at Garage Brewing Company, and I'm here to show you around our brewery.
All right, let's check it out.
All right, so this room back here, we kind of start where the beer starts. This is all of our barley and malt gets milled. Through the mill here, we have a couple indoor silos with all of our base pale malt and a conveyance system. And we also have some super sacks here, which we keep all of our wheat. And we go through a lot of wheat here because we make a lot of mango Hefeweizen, and that's our #1 selling beer.
Yeah, that beer's amazing.
Yeah, people really are passionate about that beer for sure.
I see that beer everywhere.
Everywhere, yep. This is also where the barley kind of finishes its life. So here's where all the finished barley, or what we call spent grain, comes. And it, gets kind of pumped out here to this room where we ship it off then to a local farmer, and he feeds it to his cattle and his animals for animal feed. So it's a nice kind of recycling thing. We get to get rid of it. He gets to utilize it for his livestock.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's very typical for most breweries. So.
Okay.
Our mechanical room here houses a big water filtration system. So all of our beers start out with the base filtered water. We also have our things like CO2 storage, glycol cooling system, and our air compressor back there in that room. Kind of the heartbeat of the brewery, like the heart. You want to make a machine run, you need compressed air, you need CO2, you need cooling, all those types of things. So mechanically around the brewery, that's where some of the more important pieces of equipment just to keep things running are.
All right.
Well, let's go check out where the beer actually gets made.
Ooh, I can smell the beer already.
So our brewery is a 30-barrel brew house. This brewery is about 4 years old. That makes about 60 kegs of beer in one batch. It's a 2-vessel system, so those 2 big tanks up there between the platform are where the beer actually is brewed. Behind there we have cold and hot water storage for the brewing. And for reference, these 3 little tanks down here are a pilot or kind of a trial brewing system. So when we're trying out a new recipe or refining a recipe, we can do little test batches there before we scale it up to be bigger and bigger each time.
Cool.
So from the brew day, it's about a 7 or 8 hour day to make a batch of beer. But at the end of that day, that's when the yeast takes over and the fermentation begins. I'll show you where all that happens.
Okay.
There's a lot of hoses and stuff, so be careful where you're walking.
Okay.
So these are little 1-barrel fermenters. So we have 3 of those, and they're all temperature controlled with coolant, so we can maintain fermentation temperature, which is really essential to try to recreate on a smaller scale what will become a bigger scale. So these real small little tanks. But these are 60-barrel tanks, so a double batch of beer from the brew house will go into these tanks to make a full 60 barrels of beer.
These are giant.
Which are very large tanks, and which again makes about 120 normal size kegs of beer.
Wow, that's ginormous.
This is a workspace, so we have lots of small little gadgets, including this big kind of tank back here in the middle, which is called the hop egg. And that's where we actually mix the hops up in a little bit of beer before we then pump it into a big tank of beer. And that's usually for dry hopping a beer like an India Pale Ale, an IPA, that style of beer.
Okay.
We can also use that to infuse coffee or chilies into other styles of beers as well. So it's a real nice little versatile piece of equipment for us.
Nice.
So after the fermentation is finished, and that takes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks, usually, including maturation time, then the beer is going to be clarified in some way. Even our Hefeweizen, which is an unfiltered beer, actually does get slightly clarified. We want to have a consistency of that cloudy characteristic. It's not so one bottle is clearish and one bottle is super thick and milky looking. We want to have that Hefeweizen be the same every time. So that means every single beer that we make here goes through the centrifuge. And that's this piece of equipment here.
Okay.
So it actually spins the beer, and all of the heavy particles like proteins and yeast actually fly out to the edges and then get discharged and get disposed of. So it's not quite filtration, it's called separation.
Okay.
So we're separating all the solid particles away from the beer itself.
Got it.
So on leaving that centrifuge, the beer will enter what's called a finished beer or a bright beer tank. And that's these tanks that have the flat bottoms on them. And the only purpose and reason for that is that you can fit more beer in the same amount of space in the in the building. So these are finished beer tanks, and they hold the carbonated, ready-to-go beer. So today Brian has been packaging off of a tank of mango Hefeweizen, and so he's just finishing it off. We can kind of see where he stands here. So today he started with about 61 barrels of beer or something like that, and we're down to like the last barrel in the sight glass. So I can show you the process over here, what we got going on. So this is where then we hook up a sanitized hose to that tank, and actually we can fill 4 kegs at one time, and we can empty off a tank of beer in one day, no problem at all. So the kegs are kept under pressure, so as the beer fills in there, it doesn't foam, but then when we slowly let the pressure out, that allows a little bit more beer to come in. So those buckets of foam there are just the little bit of beer that comes out at the end of the filling process to make sure the keg is full. So it builds up slowly.
Nice.
The finished beer straight into kegs, or another way we can do is we can can the beer, and that's real popular these days, and I'll show you the canning line.
Let's check it out.
Oh, some really cool things on the way to the canning line that we'll check out. This is a carbonator, so we carbonate and recirculate the beer through this. This is from a company in Phoenix, Arizona, and we can, once we get this system set up, we can carbonate a tank of beer in about 45 minutes, so we don't have to wait around, and it does a fantastic job. But the really cool thing is this yeast propagation system. This is a German design system. It involves like probably 2 stages, so we'll start the yeast off in this tank, and about 2 to 3 days later, then it enters this bigger tank with more unfermented beer, and about 2 to 3 days later, we'll have enough yeast to do a whole batch of beer. So this is a German system. In Southern California, there's probably only like 2 or 3 other breweries that have yeast propagation systems like this, or similar to this. And so this is really what separates us as far as our consistency of our beer, where we have good, fresh, high-quality yeast for every single batch of beer. And we're creating it on our own, creating it from scratch, and making the proper quantity and making sure it's of the correct health. You know, we as brewers, we pretty much make wort. We make sugar water from barley and spice it with hops, but really it's the yeast that turns that actually into alcohol and into beer that we enjoy drinking. So having healthy yeast is really, really important. So our canning line over here, it's in a U shape. We start off with our depalletizer. This is where a whole pallet of cans will go, and they will slowly twist down through a rinser to get rinsed out, and then through a filling device and a seaming device. I'll kind of show you around here this direction. These are our 2 keg washers here.
Okay.
Thanks, Josh. So here's the filler over here. We don't have probably a great shot of it unless you get real tight in there.
So this is where it starts up here?
Yep.
And it
Where
goes...
the empty cans kind of come through the process.
We go down here.
Then across the conveyor and then through this filler. And so the cans all get purged of any air that's in there before the beer goes in. And then once they're filled, they come by the lid chute and they pick up a lid. And then they're going to enter into the seaming system over here, where basically it seals the lid on the top of the can. And then they get a little bit of a shower to rinse any beer off, and a little blow dry station, and on to labeling and date coding. So how do you know if your beer is good? How do you know how long it's been sitting on the shelf? Well, you don't unless somebody puts a date on it. So part of the process for us here at this brewery is that every single beer, when it comes through, is going to get printed with the date that we deem it's best by. So every single can you buy from us, every single bottle should have a best by date on it. And that's really important to look for. There's a lot of choices out there, and we want to make sure that, you know, our customers, when they do finally give us a shot and try and buy our beer, that's going to be a beer that's still fresh and in good condition, so we don't have customers moving on to somebody else.
Right, yeah, most come with that date now, right?
Hopefully they're not hiding that from you. Hopefully they're very open about that. And what we do here is when we have beer that's on the shelf for a little too long, we bring it back to the brewery and we destroy it. It doesn't go to our houses, to our parties. It goes down the drain because, we want to make sure that even the beer we drink tastes
fresh.
good.
Absolutely.
Fresh.
Cool.
So just after it picks up a little date code on the top of the can, it does go through a labeler if that's a beer that we do make like a seasonal product, and it picks up a unique label for that style of beer, and then onto a 6-packing machine. And this type of material these days is actually UV sensitive, so if this material is out in the sun for 2 or 3 days, it will actually degrade and become really brittle, so it will break very easily. So it's no longer a risk to wildlife and animals out there.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Very, very cool that they've been able to kind of adapt plastics and make them like that.
Yeah. It's becoming a bigger thing now with straws and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to think about our environment, and that really thin plastic is less footprint, less carbon footprint, and still does the purpose of keeping your beer together,
Nice. All right. Well, what do we have here in the back?
So this is a lot of where the grain storage is, keg storage, clean kegs, dirty kegs. We've got a whole system of how to handle all that, but we do a lot of just the kind of warehousing of material on the pallets. Nothing too special there. You can see a pallet of kegs that's going to be on the process to ready to get filled. Might be like this, but then when they're all wrapped up and finished, they're going to get scanned and logged into the system with a unique code and banded with some stretch wrap as well as some bandings to keep them nice and tight so they're not dangerous if they get lifted around. A lot of our bulk rolls of labels you might see over here. So when we buy glass and a lot of cans, they might not have any kind of label on them, right? So they just come in bulk form. But we do need to then have rolls of labels to basically know what's in the package, obviously. So this is where we keep a lot of our label stock over here.
Okay.
Again,
just finished product.
Finished product. That's the best part, right?
Absolutely. I want that beer.
Right. So this is a nice chilly room, about 38 degrees.
All right. Ooh, it is
and
chilly in here.
That allows the beer, while it's waiting to be sold, to be in a proper prime condition, so the beer isn't warming up and cooling down, warming up and cooling down. So in here, 38 degrees. Every keg, every can, every bottle is really happy, and then when we're ready to ship,
the temperature is really important.
Temperature is very important. The warmer the beer is, the more it ages more quickly. So the cooler we keep it before it goes out to the consumer, then the longer the shelf life will be, and the fresher the beer will taste to the customer.
That's awesome. We love a good cold beer.
Yeah, most beers are better cold. Not all, but most are, for sure.
Okay, we have a little stash here in the back.
That stash is for all of our guys and girls who work in the brewery, that's the most important. That's the after-work beer stash.
Nice. I'll be stopping by in a sec.
Absolutely. Make sure you go home with a few good tasting beers, for sure.
Oh, I will.
So that's kind of our layout here, how the beer flows through the brewery. It takes a lot of passion, a lot of hard work, and a lot of attention to detail. So happy to show you guys around today and give you a little insight to what we do here at Garage.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure.